A sobering finish to what was an incredible series as the Nashville Predators lose in Game 6 to the Carolina Hurricanes in Bridgestone Arena. I'm Lucas Panzica of 104.5 The Zone. He is Alex Daugherty of A to Z Sports. You've heard him in the entire lead up to the Preds postseason push and throughout this series. And Alex, another overtime game, the fourth straight. Really incredible how the last four games have gone. And just over a minute into the period, Jacob Slavin, who made his return from injury on Tuesday in Game 5 with the shot from the wall that looked like it may have been redirected by Sebastian Aho. We'll see who officially gets that goal. But my goodness, a shocking ending to the Nashville Predators season.
Yeah, I mean, the Predators were up 3-1 in this game. No excuses for how this ended for them because, I mean, this was exactly what they needed to do. They were up 3-1. They had this building just absolutely on fire, and they end the second period on the power play, and they start the third period on the power play, and everything's going well. A couple instances. Number one, Roman Josi goes out with an injury. He gets a head injury on a hit. I have not actually even seen the hit yet. I just saw that he was out. I don't know if it was dirty. I'll have to take a look at that. I think he hit his head on the glass, maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It bounced off the glass. Yeah,
so they lose him, and to be honest, after that, Carolina played probably their best period of the series. I mean, that was, well, maybe not. It's the game 2 they played well, but probably one of their best periods of the series in terms of just absolutely, completely dominating the Predators in their own zone, who did not look like they had an answer for missing Roman Josi. They had to shuffle their defensive pairs a lot. So, look, a lot would say that the Predators had no business being in this series, but they made it a series. They got to Game 6. They're less than 20 minutes away from forcing Game 7, and they can't hold a lead. It's just, look, Carolina's good, but you were right there, and you can't think of this anything other than they blew it. They blew it. And Kai Jones says that. Plenty of Donald Red said that. Look, they're right. They blew it. They blew this opportunity.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. Look, they got out to the start that they did on Tuesday as well, and you could say the same thing about Tuesday's game, but this felt like much more of a gut punch, Alex, in that the Preds actually outplayed the Hurricanes throughout the game. Not so much that they played their game. I think on Tuesday, a lot of it was the frustration they caused to the Carolina Hurricanes working in the Preds' favor. They straight up outplayed the Hurricanes. They outshot the Hurricanes for the majority of this game. And yeah, like you said, a 2-goal lead for the first time in this series. And for that game-tying goal to be, number one, a questionable icing call, but obviously that's, that's pointless to discuss at this point. But a lost faceoff by Colton Sissons, who at that point was 8 for 10 on the night. He had been excellent in the faceoff circle. And then a blown assignment defensively, and Dougie Hamilton has a clear path to the back post to tie it up 3-3.
Man, the thing with hockey is, and I want to comment on a couple of things that people are saying here, because a couple are good and some of them we need to address. But one thing is, the margin for error here is very, very small. Look on game 5. What do we talk about? That Nikash play. The Nikash play changed that game. This game, Roman Josi leaving. Cody says, that's what they get for shutting down the forecheck. They didn't shut down the forecheck. They were completely scrambling in their own defensive zone to recover on the loss of Roman Josi. They were pressing for goals. They were so overrun in their own zone, they could not get out of it. You can't forecheck if the Canes don't have the puck in their own zone. So I don't think that they shut down anything. It wasn't a tactical decision. They weren't trying to sit back. I don't even think that they were playing much of a trap game. I think they played very similarly at first in the third period. It's just that one loss is so massive for them, and they couldn't recover. Now, if you want to blame John Hines for not being able to recover quickly on losing Josi, that's fine. That if you want to say he didn't have a backup plan, that's fine. I don't think it had anything to do with the tactical change or anything. So anyways, and then some people are saying, I think a lot of people agree with the loss of Josi. Terrence Young, why didn't Pecorine play? I don't know what in the world you think Pecorine could have done that Juuse Saros couldn't have done.
Oh my goodness.
So that didn't really make much of a difference. Juuse Saros was great. So
He was incredible in the third period. Some of the most highlight reel saves that we've seen from him in this series, quite honestly. He was absolutely incredible. Look, the Preds, the reason this is going to be so gut-punching is the Preds did so many of the right things. Ultimately, they are outshot by the Hurricanes, 31-27 in a 4-3 final in overtime, but they win the faceoff percentage, Alex, 55% to 45%. That's the largest advantage the Preds have had at the end of a game this season. And eating pucks, Alex, 20 blocks by the Preds to the Hurricanes 11. This is something I've kind of talked about throughout the series. They had 31 blocks in the second double OT game at home. They had 20 blocks in the first double OT game at home, and they have 20 here in a game that goes 3 periods plus just 1 minute. They were getting in front of the puck. Ryan Ellis with some incredible efforts there before it even gets to UC Saros. They got off to great starts. The Herd line, I thought, one of their best performances of the series. Mikhail Granlund was incredible today with a goal and an assist. They did so many of the right things, and to lose on an equalizing goal with a lost faceoff and a missed defensive assignment, man, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, and Corey Lee there says no reason to scratch Fabro. I really think that's a good point. I mean, look, Fabro, when obviously, you lose Roman Josi, I don't think you could, you can't prepare for that kind of a thing. But I mean, Fabro probably could have played some pretty big minutes tonight. I mean, if Roman Josi goes down, Fabro, who's been playing top 4 minutes all season, could have stepped in place of Matt Benning, and you bump Matt Benning down. So I don't know. I don't know why Dante Fabro didn't play. They haven't indicated that it's any kind of an injury. He wasn't labeled with an injury anyways. Daniel Merritt, Saros played his heart out. I'm sorry, I'm reading yours and I'm reading theirs.
Sure, absolutely.
Saros played his heart out, and the offense left him to dry. Daniel, I think that is the quote that goes under this season. Saros played excellently. He allowed he what was it, 27 shots. They did only allow 31 shots on goal.
31 to 27, yeah.
31 shots on goal, which is, I think, the second, maybe, I can't remember if that's the lowest allowed in a game.
It's tied with the least amount of shots, because the only game that the Preds have outshot the Hurricanes in this series was game 2, and it was 32-31.
So they did their job tonight. They did kind of what I said they should do and reduce Saros' workload, and he played well. Look, I mean, all these were deflections. These are just goals like you can't really do much to. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that there's anyone if you can blame anyone, it's not UC Saros, and it's probably not. I don't think you can blame Ryan Johansson either. I mean, that guy played really well tonight. The last 4 games from him have been amazing. So
he did play very well tonight. Yeah.
Philip Forsberg, looked at times like the guy that you want to see out there, but sometimes, I mean, he makes so many individual plays that look incredible, but he wasn't able to connect with his line mates a couple times. Matt Duchene, I don't think he had a great night tonight. The middle 2 lines were okay. Granlund had a great night, like you said. It sounds like excuse making to say that one injury can make a difference, but they lost a Norris Trophy winning defenseman for the final 18 minutes, whatever it was, 16 minutes. And like, you can't recover from that. And especially when the other team, one of the best teams in the NHL, is trying their hardest to tie this game up. I mean, that's a tall task. So you got to keep that in mind.
I see the chat pouring in. We're going to try and get to all of these. We are live on 104.5 The Zone's Twitter and Twitch, A to Z Sports Facebook and YouTube, as the Preds lose the first round series in 6 to the Carolina Hurricanes, 4-3 in overtime. Jacob Slavin with the game-winning goal. It was redirected off Sebastian Aho, I believe, just over a minute into the overtime period. So we've seen a lot of this here in the chat so far. Here, Alex, Lucas Panzica, Alex Daugherty with you. Do you feel like the Preds did take the foot off the gas pedal? They led in shots throughout the game. It had, I think, a 10-shot advantage after the second period, and then obviously ultimately are outshot, and the Hurricanes have most of the offensive time zone in the third. What do you think about the way the Preds played after garnering the two-goal lead for the first time in this series?
Well, I think that they were scrambling. I'm trying to sit here and watch the game-tying goal. I missed it live, and they didn't show any replays.
Yeah,
on the arena,
and Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports asked, who missed that defensive assignment on the tying goal?
I don't think there was anyone that missed anything. It looked like to me. So Slavin gets the puck on the left board. He sends it on net. Oh my gosh, Aho just makes a perfect deflection. Look, it looked like it was going straight into Rene's
Oh, you're talking about the
into Rene's
game-winning
chest.
goal.
I'm
Right.
sorry, yeah, the game-winning goal. Was he
But the
talking about
game-tying goal that Dougie Hamilton scored, yeah, do you know who missed that defensive assignment?
Gotcha. That was Trennan. So actually, Ellis went out to the point. He's not supposed to do that, but I think he did that because he saw Trennan not going out there. So I might be confusing which one went out there, but Ellis and Trennan got had a miscommunication, and Dougie Hamilton pinched down because he saw what was happening. So it was Ellis and Trennan.
Kai Jones says Sissons and Duchesne even had breakaways or 2-on-1 chances, but of course they hesitated like always. It was very frustrating, Alex, to watch the Preds, and it's been all series, squandering breakaway chances, 1v1 chances. There was one early in the game today. I believe Ryan Johansson had one right in front of the goal, just like he did on Tuesday. And that continues to come back to bite the Preds. It happened plenty of times tonight.
Man, I mean, there were so many, right? I mean, like there were numerous 2-on-1s just throughout the game, and it was guys that you would expect to put them home, but it was also some guys that aren't in that situation a lot. I mean, Sissons had Janot on one early on. He couldn't quite get the puck on his stick, and he couldn't connect with Janot. Ryan Johansson had a couple. Forsberg. Daniel says Forsberg was a bust this series. Look, I don't think you can call him a bust. I mean, the guy. He did score a couple goals. I mean, it's not like he didn't do anything. If you want to call anyone a bust, it's difficult because if you think about the way this series unfolded, at key times they had top players contribute, right? But then at times when they don't need them to contribute, like putting ahead a third goal or a fourth goal, they didn't contribute. So they weren't able to put the gas pedal all the way down, right? That was kind of what happened. They did contribute at key times, and they pushed it to 6 games, but they didn't contribute. They didn't do what elite players do, right? They didn't kill them, and when they had them down on the mat, right? So they didn't do what elite players do.
And it just wasn't consistent enough, right? I mean, Ryan Johansson was all over the place tonight. He had a fantastic outing, but it felt like every other game that we were coming away saying, okay, this was a good performance by Ryan Johansson. This was a good performance by Matt Duchesne. You just didn't have the consistency there across the board from that top line that you needed to knock off a team like Carolina that brought it every night with the sat line, that brought it with very minimal lineup changes that Rod Brind'Amour really didn't have to make. And this is a much tougher series for John Hines, right? I saw one commenter way up in the chat that I've lost at this point saying, fire Hines. John Hines was tasked with more lineup decisions than Rod Brind'Amour, right, in this series.
Yeah.
It was a much tougher job for him in this series, and it made it that much tougher when those guys just didn't give that consistent effort. When the effort they give gets them taken off the power play, that's tough for John Hines to overcome.
Yeah, no doubt. And some people are saying more about Forsberg being a bust. Okay, here's what I'll say. He's probably not that next tier player. He's not a next tier forward that is going to score 40 goals or 50 goals or anything like that. He's a 30 goal, 30 assist, 60 point kind of player. Those players are great to have. I mean, those are players the Predators don't usually have. But no, he's not a dagger, elite, transcend your position kind of player like some people want him to be. And neither is Duchesne or Johansson. I mean, they don't have that player right now. I mean, Roman Josi might be the closest, but they don't have that player right now. They got to go get one. Either draft. I mean, it's possible this Tomasino guy is one, but we're not going to see him for a while. So there's, Evan says Hines adapted throughout the series. I totally agree with that. I mean, I think certainly. Hines adapted well. I think his adaptation in the game was great. He adjusted. He made moves that made sense. I don't know about putting Brad Richardson in this game, but I don't think Richardson played a bad game. Won
a very key penalty early on.
Yeah, and Dante Fabro is about the only decision I could question. I mean, him not even coming to any single game, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It makes me think he's not part of the future.
Certainly, absolutely. I mean, if he's not going to make any impact, not going to have any involvement in any game in a first-round playoff series, then what does he mean? What impact does he have on this team moving forward? Why is he on this roster?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you're saying. Wait, the media availability is about to start, so I might go ahead and run.
Sure thing, Alex.
Granlund, Ellis, and Johansson are going to be up, and then Hines as well. But so I have no idea what you just said. But bottom line, the Predators blew the chance to force Game 7. If they didn't, I will say this: if they didn't have Roman Yossi in that Game 7, and they probably wouldn't, that was going to be a tough game to win. So
certainly, and it would have been at PNC Arena in Carolina. Alex, we will let you go chat with John Hines and the players. Appreciate you, man, and all the work you've done throughout this postseason and the lead up to it. We'll talk to you tomorrow. I know you'll be on Blaine and Mickey with myself and Blaine Bishop tomorrow on 104.5 The Zone. Looking forward to that. We'll wrap up the season with you then. Until then, appreciate you, Alex Daugherty.
Yeah, thanks a lot. See you, everyone.
All right, man. Will Bowling has entered the chat, so we will bring Will in. Will, man, you made it quick, huh? You got home pretty fast. I know you were in attendance there at Bridgestone Arena. Look, the chat is pouring in. We are live on 104.5 The Zone's Twitter and Twitch, A to Z Sports on Facebook and YouTube. Alex Daugherty is off to media availability as the Preds fall in overtime, 4-3 in Game 6, ending the season in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Central Division winning Carolina Hurricanes. Will, man, that atmosphere was popping through the TV. What can you tell me about what it was like over there?
It was pretty incredible. I mean, after the third goal for Nashville to take a 3-1 lead, it was awesome. It was the loudest that I had heard Bridgestone Arena during this series for sure. And at the end of the second overtime, that arena for me reached, or at least was getting close to reaching, 2017 Stanley Cup final kind of noise. It was the loudest I'd heard that Bridgestone Arena in a second period since Colton Sisson's goal. Yes, Colton Sisson's goal in the 2017 Stanley Cup final. It was crazy. Nashville deserves better. That arena tonight deserved better than the way the Predators played after they went up 3-1.
Zachary says, as a Canes fan, I'm super impressed with the Preds. Definitely respect you guys. Look, you do have to credit this team for what they turned this series into, especially after going down in games 1 and 2. But just the disappointment of the last 2 games where you felt like the performances were so positive, the frustration they put on the Canes in Game 5 in Raleigh on Tuesday. And then tonight, Will, Alex and I were talking about it. They flat out outplayed the Hurricanes. They were just the better team on the ice. It wasn't so much that they were kind of doing things to offset the deficiencies that have plagued the Preds all season with the top teams in the division. They were just the better hockey team for 2 periods today. Took the foot off the gas maybe a little bit after going up 2 goals for the first time in the series, and it comes back to bite them. But again, I go back to that tying goal, 3-3, Dougie Hamilton, a blown assignment on a lost faceoff after a questionable icing call, and then, of course, a loss in overtime just a minute in. I mean, it's hard to think of much more brutal ways to end a season.
Yeah, I mean, once it got to 3-2, I almost tweeted this out, but I couldn't get any reception in the arena again, which is something I'm not used to after the last year we've had in sports. You kind of got the feeling the only way the Preds were going to win is with Carolina having 2 goals.
Yeah.
You felt like that if Carolina was able to suck everything out of that building at 3-3,
the only way Carolina was going to win. Yeah.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah. Carolina was going to win. If they tie that thing up 3-3, it's going to be really hard to do what you've already done twice in this series and come back and then go win in overtime. You just got the feeling this one was not going to be destined for another 2 overtime marathon. This was a lot like game number 5. And Lucas, at this point, it's weird because the Predators were really close to winning this series in 6 games. They've got a 3-2 lead with 6 minutes left in the third period in both games 5 and game 6. But you can spin it that way, or you could spin it with the Preds are really close to going 0-6 in this series. I mean, that's the incredible part about this is that Nashville could have easily lost games 3 and game 4. So people are going to try to spin this both directions over the next couple of days. Here's where I fall on this. Another first round exit is an absolute failure for this franchise and for this team because David Poile, once again, Lucas, refused to sell and refused to buy at the trade deadline. And at this point, making 7 straight postseasons, if you're the Nashville Predators, is doing more harm than it is doing good because you're going to continue getting 15 to 20 in the first round. That's going to be where you're picking. I mean, this is the equivalent of going 8-8, 9-7 in the NFL every year and somehow still making the playoffs. I don't know if this is a good thing.
Yeah,
that the Nashville Predators continue to sit in hockey purgatory right now.
Well, that's certainly part of the larger discussion, right? Because in that moment, David Poile, it's so tough in that moment because he felt like he was handcuffed. You know, what am I supposed to do here? This team is on such an incredible run for a postseason push. How do I break up what's happening right now? But yeah, and then of course, in a first round exit, you take a step back and you look at it. And the Preds and David Poile have to take a serious look in the mirror. What are we as a franchise? Are we a franchise that's content with making the postseason every year and crashing out in the first, maybe the second round? Or do we want more? Are we ready to break up this core that took us to that 2017 Stanley Cup playoff run? Let's get to some of these people in the chat that have been pouring in. We appreciate all of you. We know you're frustrated as the Preds fall 4-3 in overtime. By the way, Sebastian Aho is credited with the game-winning goal, and Jacob Slavin, right, fitting. Jacob Slavin with the assist, as it was his shot that was redirected by Aho just over a minute into the overtime. So Caleb Gray, what did Hines have Duchesne on the bench for a lot of the power plays in this series for? That made no sense to me. Look, John Hines talked about this today. He didn't say it explicitly, and I wish we had the video for you, but he alluded to it, talking about the effort in tracking back pucks on the power play and how poor that was in the first and second games. And listen, the special teams play, though the production didn't really take a huge jump, though they did score a power play goal today, the special teams play took a big step forward without not only Matt Duchesne, but Ryan Johansson on the power play. And that's another huge question mark for this team, Will, is your two highest paid players, quite literally, your two highest paid players on the team, Matt Duchesne and Ryan Johansson, had to be removed from the power play. Those guys were not called upon to revive and jumpstart what's been your biggest deficiency for over the last 2 years. Another thing that David Poile is going to have to seriously question is it's not that it was a bad decision by John Hines to pull those guys from the power play, because I don't think it was. It's the fact that he had to do it.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's something that just can't happen. I mean, Lucas, the last time that Ryan Johansson played like a number one center in this league was probably before he got hurt in 2017.
He played well tonight, though. I have to give him credit tonight.
He played well, but as a number one center on a team that's trying to get out of the first round in the NHL playoffs and go to a semifinal in your conference, it's still not enough for me. I mean, what we saw tonight out of Ryan Johansson, what we've seen in this series out of Matt Duchesne should be the floor for those guys based on how much they're getting paid. I mean, that's the reality of the situation at this point. We've now seen a glimpse of what Forsberg, Johansson, Duchesne can look like. To me, that's the hope for the Nashville Predators moving forward, right? That and
that's what kept this series alive. That's what might have prevented this series from being a sweep, was throwing that curveball of putting Duchesne on that line.
I just don't think I trust that line and those guys, to stay healthy over the course of an entire season. All three of those guys were out for extended periods of time this year. Not necessarily their fault. It's just the reality of the situation. And B, I don't know if I trust those guys to show up in November.
Yeah.
When we're asking questions saying, why on earth isn't Ryan Johansson shooting more? Why is Ryan Johansson, not looking like a number one center? And then, oh, by the way, your problem with moving your number two center to wing on the top line is now who's your number two center? I mean, that then becomes it's like Defense Against the Dark Arts at Hogwarts. The number two center position for the Nashville Predators is cursed. I mean, Kyle Turris was who he was. Matt Duchesne has been awful based on the value he's at. Now Matt Duchesne's good, but he's not even a number two center. Like, it's unbelievable. Even in 2017, I mean, everybody was hurt. And at that point, Freddie Gaudreau was your number two center at one point in 2017 in the Stanley Cup Finals. So,
well, with that being said, Granlund, the starting center on the second line today, was the best Predator on the ice, I thought. He's had a great series. He's had a great season, tied for
I don't know if he's a Predator next year.
Right. I mean, well, and that's the question mark for a lot of guys. I mean, Donald Red says Saros is going to get a big boy contract by somebody in free agency. And Daniel replied to him immediately, said, better be the Preds. Otherwise, team now has no tender. Open the checkbook for him. Cut one of the mediocre forwards that are being paid like elite talents. If anybody on this team deserves to be paid based on play, it's UC Saros. Alex Daugherty said it before you hopped on, Will. This entire season was one giant disservice to UC Saros with the year he has had, especially in the last 3 months.
You're right. I think the concern for me, though, is how many big, clunky contracts you're trying to get rid of now that you would love to redo and not give Matt Duchesne 7 years, not give Ryan Ellis the duration that you gave him, even Victor Arvidsson, who, again, was not in this series. And, yes, he's injured. But, look, I am of the opinion that people are acting like UC Saros is going to be back, and that's a foregone conclusion. I don't think that's the case right now. I mean, I think your best case scenario is giving him a 1-year deal and making him prove it again, and maybe giving him more value over 1 year before you give him a long-term deal. But if I'm David Poile, your long-term deals haven't really worked. So why would you give yourself another huge one?
Who should the Preds trade, says Daniel. No one is crazy enough to pay what Nashville did to some of these players. Forsberg is one of the only valuable players on the team, and I'd hate to see him go. At what point do you trade your star? Yossi has an NTC, if I remember correctly. Look, there's the expansion draft is fast approaching, so suddenly that's where everything pivots to now for the Preds, right? I mean, you're maybe 2 weeks removed from the expansion draft for the Seattle Kraken, and David Poile has certainly been thinking about it. I think Matt Duchene is the number one name that's popped into people's minds when it comes to that. So Daniel asked, who should the Preds trade? The number one question is, who do the Preds give up in the expansion draft? And it's different, right? Because the Vegas Golden Knights snapped up James Neal and then went to the Stanley Cup Finals. So I wonder how that changes the perspective for David Poile on, okay, taking a step back, who do I want to give up for the way expansion drafts work now and how this team can be an instant competitor in the NHL?
I think Johansson might be the guy that's probably the top name who would maybe go in an expansion draft, because at this point, in terms
of offloading a contract, certainly.
Right. I think he's probably the guy, either him or Victor Arvidsson for me, in an expansion draft. I think I saw enough. You're going to look at me like I'm crazy, but I saw enough for Matt Duchene to believe a little bit in the playoff Matt Duchene. Matt Duchene was really good for a lot of this playoff series after, obviously the first 2 games he was awful and it wasn't good. At home in games 3 and 4, he was pretty great. There's so many guys on this team that just the contracts of what they're getting paid just doesn't match the output, doesn't match the production. I don't know if Eli Tolvanen is back on this team, and that's another guy with an expiring contract. This is going to be a defining offseason for the Predators, because I don't think the core is really there like it was obviously 4 years ago, because at this point, 4 years ago was a fluke, and the first round exits are the norm. We were hoping that, the exit against Winnipeg, I know that was in the second round at the time, but you lose in game 7 at home that year. You're hoping that 2018 was the fluke. At this point, 2017 has become the fluke.
Daniel says Jeannot could be an amazing player if healthy. If he can stay healthy and remain physical, he will be fun to watch. Don't give him an extended contract, but you have to retain him on a 2-3-year deal. Tanner Jeannot back in the lineup today as part of the Herd line. Will, I thought one of their best performances of the entire series. Felt like they were constantly on the forecheck. Colton Sissons with another great outing. Again, excellent in the faceoff circle, but he did lose the one faceoff that led to the game-tying goal by Dougie Hamilton. But that's the problem, right? Is the fourth line has been the most consistent line for the Preds this season, and that can happen if you want to contend in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So yes, Tanner Jeannot had a great season, a breakout season. A lot of those guys on the quote-unquote Herd line did, but it's the guys on that first and second line that did not. And that is the issue. Daniel also says, expansion draft offloads a contract, which is good. But at what point do you trade your big names so you can get good returns in draft capital or players or prospects? And I wonder how close David Poile is right now, Will, to blowing this up. He held steadfast in the trade deadline, which is something David Poile does. I mean, in his long career as a GM, he has averaged 1 trade per trade deadline day. Mm-hmm. So that was nothing out of the ordinary that he did earlier this season. But I wonder if this is the breaking point here, because it is time, like we said, to look in the mirror and say, what are we as a franchise, and do we keep this core together, or do we just totally start over? Like, I don't know how much of an in-between there is right now for the Preds.
This seems like a natural time to give David Poile one last shot, one last offseason with all of the changes the Nashville Predators are going to have to make. I think this is a pretty natural chance for the Predators to look at David Poile and say, all right, whatever you want to do, this is your last chance, because if you don't get this one right, it's probably time. And it sucks, right? I mean, David Poile is a staple of this franchise more than anybody else that's ever been involved with the Predators. I mean, he's the last guy in charge who's been here since day one at this point. It's going to be a sad day when he moves on. I don't know how much freedom he will have, or I don't know how much he will want to take the initiative to make all these big moves and trade guys and make these big signings, knowing that his days are not long for, he's not going to be here much longer. That's just the honest truth of the matter at this point. So I don't know how aggressive you can be, knowing that you're not going to see the end of what's about to become a long-term project. Honestly, until the Predators get a new guy in at general manager, I don't expect them to blow this up. I really don't expect them to trade all these pieces, because the last thing you want, if you're David Poile, is to put the next general manager in a really tough spot where all the pieces that the next GM might have wanted are traded, right? I think David Poile loves this place. I think he loves the Predators franchise too much to just, go out guns a-blazing and just trade away, half your top line and Roman Josi. And I don't see him going out that way. I see him waiting and being more conservative. That way he's given the next guy a chance to make his big imprint on this team, whoever that may be.
Trevor Thomas says, I am sad. Matt Bernier says, series
just
last.
Seeing, we have so many of these big comments, and then just saying, I'm sad.
I'm sad.
Just brought a smile to my face.
Sums it up. Matt Bernier says, series lasted longer than many thought it would. Now it's about what happens in the offseason. And look, it did. I mean, for all we're going to talk about for the Preds, the Preds should have never been in the position they were in mid-season.
Without shootouts, they're not here at all.
And that's a great point. They were tied for the NHL lead in shootout wins with 5. Only 2 teams in the NHL had that many shootout wins, and the Preds were one of them. So they should have never been in that spot, right? Floundering in the bottom of the Central Division. But it really is, if we could just kind of zoom out for a minute, it is incredible what they did in the last 3 months. So I wonder how much that does factor into David Poile's mind, because the better team won the series tonight. Yeah. And it's a gut punch. Yes, the Preds were the better team tonight, but the Carolina Hurricanes were the better team in this series. They are the team that deserves to move on and play the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're more likely to contend for a Stanley Cup, and we know this. So, but I wonder how much that little 3-month run sticks in David Poile's mind. Like, I don't think John Hines' job is on the line.
No.
Because this was an incredible coaching job,
right,
what he and his staff did to turn this thing around. And if they just do get the more production out of the guys that you expect to, then this team, is probably winning this series. Just if you get any semblance of consistency from those guys, at least winning this series. So, I saw one comment way up in the chat saying, fire John Hines. I don't see it. I don't see that happening. I think he is, besides UC Saros, should have the most credit for this turnaround. Daniel, all these shootout wins, but on breakaways and off-man rushes, no one wants to be the guy to shoot the puck. That's a great point, actually. Daniel Merritt-Moreland with a great point. We hadn't even brought that up, because Alex and I were talking about how bad it was on one-on-one situations. And I'm going to try to do a deep dive tomorrow, Will, before Blaine and Mickey, and see what kind of analytics I can drum up of the Preds in one-on-one, two-on-one situations, because for how good the Preds were in shootouts this season, they didn't lose a shootout all season, which is literally just involves essentially breakaways, one-on-one situations. They were dreadful in those situations in the postseason. That's fascinating and a great point by Daniel.
It's incredible. I mean, it is such a timid kind of philosophy when this team gets 2-on-1 or 1-on-0 and 1 on just the goalkeeper. I mean, it's a great point. I mean, who was it? I can't remember the player. Preds had a chance to go up 2-0 tonight, right before they gave up the power play. It may have been Nick Cousins gets a breakaway, not a total breakaway, but a 2-on-1, and he's alone with Nedeljkovic, and it's saved. And then you pick up the penalty about 45 seconds later to a minute. You give up the power play goal.
I wrote down the Preds' inability to score on 1v1, 2-on-1 situations is infuriating. I did not write down who the player was, but Nick Cousins does.
And it wasn't a power play. It was before Svechnikov's first goal. I'm mistaking that with another power play later, but it was a swing where the Predators could have been up 2-0, and then about 45 seconds later, it was 1-1. And they were playing really good hockey. This also goes back to game number 5. I mean, how different is tonight's game if Ryan Johansson scores with about 6 or 7 minutes left in the third period and makes it 4-2 Predators?
Which is the exact same conversation we had after game 5 with the chance Johansson had with 10 minutes to go in the third period. It would have made it a 2-goal lead.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. I mean, how different is tonight if Ryan Johansson scores that? I mean, literally, you can point to about 2 different plays and say, if these go differently, the Predators are on to Tampa Bay right now. And then you can also say, all right, well, if Matt Duchene doesn't, catch a length of the ice chip over the top, then maybe the Predators get swept. I mean, it's incredible how close the margins were in this series. And Lucas, I kept expecting the blowout. My prediction for tonight was Predators lose 4-1. I thought the Preds were going to get blown out. I thought UC was going to finally give up a couple soft goals that he had been getting earlier on in this series. I thought their power play would get going, which it did. Every series seems to have that one blowout game where you've got to see the backup. I thought at one point that was going to be in the Predators' favor tonight, that we were going to see Carolina's number 2, but never got it. It's a weird series. I haven't seen a series like this in some time where the teams are so even, but at the same time, you clearly know that Carolina is the better team.
I'm doing some math here, which is a dangerous game to play. But going into this series, Will, the Preds were outshot 223 to 178. It's a large discrepancy. That's about 44 shots per game to 35 shots per game. And we expected that. But, and I saw this stat from Adam Vingen of The Athletic, the series was tied 96% of the time. So the Preds were doing something right to offset it. And with aside from the third period in game 1, this series was so close. And it really was an incredible series when you look at it. 4 straight overtime games, 2 of them double OT back to back. Some of the finishes, the back and forth, the punches being thrown back and forth, just from a neutral perspective. I mean, it was an incredible series to watch. But the Preds were significantly outshot throughout this series, which you expected. But tonight is where you felt that was different. Like my prediction when we wrapped up our show at Poncho and Lefty's pregame was this will be Carolina's best performance in Bridgestone Arena. They were the third best team. They were the third best team on the road in the NHL throughout the regular season. So I thought they're going to come out and have their best performance on the road like the Preds did in Carolina on Tuesday. That's not what happened. And I predicted them to win, but not in the way that I thought they would.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I really thought this Carolina team was going to come out. They were going to score the first goal and jump on the Predators early. And when the Preds got that first goal from Nick Cousins, you're all of a sudden thinking, okay, they might actually do this. Now, granted, Roman Josi, I don't think it was going to be available for Game 7. I know Alex Daugherty kind of said that on the way out, but
yeah, it looks like a concussion.
It did. And I would have been surprised if Roman Josi is in there on Saturday. Then you're probably turning to Eric Goodbranson or Dante Fabro, which would not have been good for the Nashville Predators at that point. The chance to win this series was finishing off game number 5 and coming back here tonight. Game number 5 effectively ended this series for me.
Yeah, certainly.
I think the Predators can be proud of the way they hung tight, I guess. But the larger discussion over the next couple of weeks and over this offseason might be that them going on a run may hurt this team long term. I mean, honestly, this is a failure of a season again. It really is. I'm not going to spin this as, the Predators did so well to get back in things and, well, look at them. They made the playoffs, 7 straight times. I hear Paul McCann, the PA announcer. I don't know. I'm probably a great guy. Thank you for being with us for our 7th straight trip to the playoffs. You're doing more harm than good, man. I mean, truly, if you continue going to the playoffs and just exit in the first round, are we really calling that a success at this point? I don't think that's a success at all. I think it's holding you back from getting back to where you want to be, where you were in 2017.
Right. Well, look, we're so used to this conversation, right? The Titans stuck in mediocrity and the 9-7 purgatory that they had been in for so long.
The 19th pick every single year. Always the 19th pick.
It's okay to say what the Preds did this season was incredibly impressive.
I agree.
So many ruled them out. And what they did in this series to stay in it was incredibly impressive. But also say, there's a lot of things wrong and that the organization needs to take a large step back. Donald Red says that sounds like mediocrity. No, I don't know that I'm willing to call it mediocrity. I mean,
it's better than that, but I mean, it's
better than that, but it's not good enough. Yeah, and that's
above
okay.
Average.
The Preds have made the playoffs seven years in a row. That's tied for the second most in the NHL with the Washington Capitals, behind only the Pittsburgh Penguins. Typically perennial contenders, 2 teams that have won the Stanley Cup in the last 5 years. So I'm not ready to sit here and call it mediocrity. 9-7, that's mediocrity. Making the playoffs 7 years in a row, I wouldn't quite call that mediocrity. But that doesn't mean that there's a lot of issues that David Poile needs to look at. And unfortunately, those issues involve your highest paid players. That is the hardest part of this. It's not finding depth in certain areas, right? It is the guys that are supposed to be your bona fide star players. So that just makes it that much harder. Like when we asked Sean McIndoe of The Athletic, a national hockey writer, I said this on Tuesday to everybody hanging out with us, came on the Buck Rising show, and I asked him, what's the biggest hole on this roster in the offseason? And he said it's the top line forwards. Because, those guys, you're just not either they're not available or they're not giving you the consistent production. We all know
been that way for 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it just, you see it in spurts. And we all know how talented Philip Forsberg is. Eddie's one of the most likable Preds players, I think, that they've ever had, at least in you and I's generation.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, this is not going to be an easy offseason for David Poile, because it just makes it that much harder when the guys that you brought in to be stars are no longer stars. And it feels like most of the others are doing their part in terms of the depth and the goaltending, which is a whole other thing with UC Saros' contract being up.
Yeah, and this is the last thing I probably got on this,
Sure.
and just kind of in general, that forget UC Saros' contract situation for a minute. This is a missed opportunity, because even if UC Saros stays, sure, maybe he's the guy again next year. I'd maybe call it 50-50 at this point if you're the Nashville Predators. This is a massive missed opportunity to have maybe the hottest goaltender in the NHL in between the pipes for you going into the playoffs. I mean, maybe the hottest is too bold of a statement, but certainly one of the top 3 or 4 goaltenders in the postseason.
Oh,
what did Lindsay Rowley say on the Buck Rising show right as soon as this series started? You need 2 things. Or the number one thing you need in the postseason is a hot goaltender to go on a run. That's what happened in 2017, right? I mean, yes, the Predators had a really good power play. Their special teams was fine. Ryan Johansson, Kevin Fiala were playing out of their minds. I think the hottest goaltender in the postseason in 2017 in Pekka Rinne. That's what carried them more than anything to a Stanley Cup final, where they had the chance to play Pittsburgh with, again, Colton Sissons and Freddie Gaudreau as your top 2 centers. You know why those were your top 2 centers and you were still competitive? Because Pekka Rinne was so good. This is a missed opportunity to have a guy that hot in goal, and you still don't get out of the first round. That wasn't the case last year. I mean, UC Saros was not good against the Arizona Coyotes last year. He was, in fact, a liability in a lot of ways. The analytics would tell you to why the Predators got knocked out in the first round last year by Brad Richardson and the Arizona Coyotes. I just think that's the most painful part of this to me, Lucas, is the fact that you had a goaltender that hot, you still can't get out of the first round.
Yeah, and it's just, it's his performances and how they've been squandered are exacerbated by the Preds' struggles to take advantage of those performances. And Daniel says Saros will end up like Pekka, one of the best goalies to never win a cup. Pekka Rinne, by the way, I wasn't watching. My roommate texted me, was pretty much the last player to leave the ice, kind of taking a lap around it. So, that you imagine was his final game in a Nashville uniform and a Nashville jersey. So what a season that we've had, right? As we kind of put a bow on things. Well, we need to go to bed. I mean, it's almost 12:30. But just kind of putting a bow on things here. What a season! I mean, from the late start in January to the shuffled divisions and just the turnaround. Like, the series felt like a microcosm of the season, because you go down 0-2, it's dreadful, and then you turn things around, and then a disappointing finish. But Pekka Rinne, with the send-off he had with the shutout and
the highlight of the year, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah, the scenes on that night. But certainly you look at an opportunity this offseason to prevent much drop-off in terms of goaltending from Pekka Rinne to UC Saros. So we'll see how David Poile kind of approaches that. That'll certainly be near the top of his list.
It's going to be interesting. We'll certainly be following it, and appreciate all you guys for joining us. Lucas has been crushing in all these pregame and postgame shows while I'm out, moonlighting at track meets this past week. But appreciate you guys, and this has kind of been for us a cool first opportunity, if I can, take a second to say this here, of getting to do this pre and postgame stuff that we're hoping to do a whole lot more of coming up for football season. And other big stuff. And at some point, we're just going to come on here and just start talking because it's the routine we've created over the last couple of weeks. But been really fun, man. This has been it's been awesome.
Yeah, 100%. And again, an incredible series to watch. Just so close the whole way through. Back-to-back double overtimes at home. Bridgestone Arena was back rocking for the first time in like 2 years.
So
I know, and you were there for pretty much every game. I know you experienced it firsthand. So an incredibly memorable season, and even a memorable postseason, despite the disappointment of the ending. Preds have a lot of work to do in the offseason, and it's going to be fun to follow. And look, the coverage doesn't stop. I know tomorrow on the Buck Rising show, we will continue to talk about this on Blaine and Mickey. I'll be live with Blaine Bishop with Alex Daugherty. We'll wrap up the Preds season moving forward. But want to give a huge thanks to our friends at A to Z Sports, Austin Stanley, Zach Bingham, for working with us on this, the partnership that we've created with them on 104.5 The Zone. Really excited for what's to come, Will. And thanks for all your hard work on this as we wrap up the season. It's been fun. What are your parting words here as we this is the Preds funeral for the 2020-2021 season as they lose 4-3 in overtime, the fourth straight overtime game in this series. Sebastian Aho redirects a Slavin shot for the game winner. The Preds lose in 6 games in Bridgestone Arena. What do you got here as we wrap things up?
Last thing for me, I refuse to spin this season. I'm not going to do it. The only way you could spin this season if this is a team that wasn't making the playoffs in 2020 and 2019, if this is a team that's just getting to the postseason for the first time in a while, sure, that season's great. That's awesome. We've got to look beyond 2021 for the context of how we evaluate this season. And over the next couple of days, you're going to hear people saying, oh, well, considering the way they started the season, this season's a big success. Kudos to the Predators on 7 straight. The context has to be bigger than that. Don't let people trick you into spinning this season into a big success because of the context of what happened early on in the season. Have a bigger context of what's happened since 2018. You've made it out of the first round once, and you probably shouldn't have even then with a Colorado Avalanche team in 2018 that pushed this team to the brink as well. That's what I got at this point. I said this, and this is not even an emotional post-game reaction. I said this going into game 1 and said, if they lose in the first round, it's a failure of a season. I don't care what they did to get here. The end result is the end result. That's what we have to judge this team on, and that's what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of days.
There you go. Daniel loves it. No spin. Will
Thank
with
you,
the
Daniel.
knuckleball. The Preds fall again in overtime in 6 games as we move into the offseason. It's been fun. A huge shout out to Alex Daugherty, all the work that he has done. Appreciate
hardest
him.
working guy in showbiz this week.
Yeah, no doubt.
Last week.
We've stretched him thin on the 104.5 The Zone airwaves. We'll continue to do so tomorrow on Blaine and Mickey. So for Alex Daugherty, all our friends at A to Z Sports on 104.5 The Zone, and Will Bowling, I'm Lucas Panzica. Everybody go to bed. Good night.
Please. Good night.